Hello everyone, I'm Ola Ajibola, and today I'll be talking about event listeners in JavaScript. Okay, so what are events and event listeners? JavaScript's interaction with HTML is handled through events that occur when the user or the browser manipulates a web page. For anything to occur on the web page, we need to tell the web page to listen for an event. The event could be a left click of the mouse or the click of a button on the keyboard. The syntax for adding event listeners to an element is this. First, we select the element dot the add event listener method. Then, as an argument, first we pass in the event, which could be a click or any sort of event actually. Then a callback function, which would be called after whatsoever event that was specified. So we have eight essential types of events in JavaScript. First, we have the user interface event. Examples of user interface events. First, we have the load event. So, the load event fires just after the page finishes loading. So, as an example, first, we're going to select the window element. We are going to add event listener like this, just as I was explained in the first slide. Then, in quotes, we're going to specify the event, which in this case is the load. Then after the load, we're going to insert a callback function, which will be called by the add event listener method itself. So for the example, to be a simple log to the console. So what is it log? The page has been loaded. So I'm going to try that, and you see that just after the page loaded, it was logged to the console that the page has been loaded. So um that's how the load event. That's how we can apply the load event to our code. That's how we can listen to the load event basically. So similar for the unload event, but this would be right after the page unloads. That's when you're about to leave the page basically. So I'm just going to paste this here, then unload. Notice that the event is inside quotes like a string. It won't work if it's not written like that. Then okay, I'm just going to log the page has been unloaded for this. Now to see this, it won't appear for long because to be when the page is about to close. So I'm going to save this and oh sorry, it's coming this out. Okay, if you notice for like a split second there, you can see the page has been unloaded. And that was right before the page refreshed itself. So there are other applications to this, like it could be an alert or a prompt on your browser, or maybe a change to the styling or anything at all. Well, this is basically how the unload event is listening to. Next, we have error events. So the callback function will be called when there's an error in JavaScript. So I'm going to also apply this to the window and then error. There's no error at the moment, so there's also locked to the console. So I'm just going to create an error here. Okay, before this class, I already selected an element that did not exist, so it's going to be an error where it won't be able to apply to. There won't be an element to apply to. So I call it error element. So I'm just going to select this non-existing element and do anything on it. So error. So I'm going to by the time I save this, the page reloads. See, we have that locked to console. An error was detected. The resize events. So, as the name indicates, when we resize the window, whatever function is in the callback function will be called. So, well, the same thing. So resize. Let's log that to the console. So to demonstrate this, I'm just going to move this, and we have that in the console. So every time the window is resized, it logs to the console. And finally, for when we have the final and the scroll, and just like the others, well, as the name indicates, whenever we scroll on the page, it's going to call the function. So that's the demonstration. So every time we scroll on the page, it logs out to the console. Next, we have mouse events. So mouse events are probably the most common events that we have to apply event listeners to in our HTML, and you can apply the mouse events to every element on your page. That's from the body itself to any element you can think of. Okay, for an example of mouse event, I created a light bulb on my page and a switch. So every time you click on the switch, it should turn the light bulb off and on. So now to achieve this, I have two images in my file, one of the light bulb off and one of the light bulb on. So I already selected this in my JavaScript. So with query selector, I named the names are light bulb on and light bulb off. So then there's a function that toggles the class name hide. So on my CSS, I set hide to display none. So what should happen every time we call the switch bulb, it should it should set the light bulb that is off to hide. Like it shouldn't display that, and it should display the light bulb that is on. So now we're going to apply this event to the switch button, of course. And I selected the switch button here. That's this here. So switch L. I'm going to select that. That's our element. Then add event listener. Then since it's a click event, so click. Then the function we're about to call is switch bulb. Now you notice that you don't have to put the parentheses in front of this because we're not actually calling the function. We're just inputting it like we would a variable. So the event listener method actually calls the function for us. We don't have to do that. I'm going to save this and now I'm going to try to see if it works. And it works. So every time I click on the switch, it calls this function, which is the switch bulb. Now the function works. Other mouse events include the double click, which fires when the user clicks the primary mouse button in quick succession twice. Then the mouse down, which fires when the user clicks down on any mouse button. The mouse up, which fires when the user releases on any mouse button. The mouse over, which fires when the cursor goes over whatever element selected. The mouse out, which fires when the cursor leaves whatever element selected. And mouse move just is triggered whenever the cursor moves at all. Now you can apply them the same way you've applied the click. There is the same syntax, you just have to place it depending on whatever event you like to listen to. Then we have keyboard events. So keyboard events fire whenever the user interacts with the keyboard on any device. Okay, for keyboard events, I'll be using the same example as the click event, the mouse event, I mean. So every time I click on the, say, enter key on my keyboard, it should switch the light bulb on or off. So I'll be applying this to the document element. So it doesn't have to be until I over one specific element on the page. To be any event that happens anytime I click on the button while I'm on the entire page. So document dot add event listener, of course. Then for keyboard events, mainly it could be the a key press, a key down, or a key up. So a key press will detect it when the button has been pressed. So that's when the key has been pressed down and has been released. So when those two events happen, that's when the key press happens. If it's a key up, it should be after the key has been pressed. So when the key returns back up, and the key down is when the key is down. So I'm going to use a key press for this. Then it should switch bulb. Now what I've just done is when any key at all is pressed on my keyboard, it should switch the bulb. So right now, click on any button and it works. So I'm clicking on random buttons right now and switching the bulb. But what we want to do is we want to we want it to work for only the enter button. So we have to specify that in our function. Now, in the callback function, we can actually um put in a parameter here. So I'll just call it key, and let's log that to the console and see what what it contains every time I click on the button. Okay, let's save that. Now we click on enter here. Now see that in our console we have all the information about the keyboard event. So it has the name of the key that was pressed, which is enter, and a bunch of other stuff and the code and everything. So we can now make take different actions based on the information that we have here. So since I want it to be for only the enter key, I could put an if statement here. So if key dot key, yeah, key dot key is sorry, let's put bracket. If key dot key is equal to enter, then it should toggle the light bulb on or off. So I'm going to try that now. I'm going to save that. Now every time I click on the enter key, now let me show the console again. So if I click on any other key, sorry, if I click on any other button, shows the keys but doesn't switch the light bulb. By the time I click on enter, then the light bulb switches off or on. So that's how we use keyboard events as we work with event listeners. Then we have form events. Now form events are common while using forms on a web page. In particular, we see the submit event mostly in form of validations. Now, the submit event fires on the node representing the form element when a user submits a form. The change event fires when the status of various form elements change. Then the input event is very common with the input and text area elements. Normally, we often use focus and blur events with forms, but they're also available in conjunction with other elements like links. Now, the focus and blur events fire when the HTML element you can interact with gains or loses focus. They are mostly commonly used in forms and especially helpful when you want to show tips or feedback to users as they interact with an element within a form. The tips are usually shown in elements other than the one the user is interacting with. And they can also be used to trigger form validation as the user moves from one control to the next without wanting to submit the form. Then the focus event fires when an element gains focus. The blur event fires when a DOM element loses focus. The focus in and the focus out is about the same as focus and blur, but isn't supported on Firefox at the moment. Then we have other essential types of events. We have HTML5 events, we have status events, and we have mutation events. And when you need to apply them to your code, they follow a very similar syntax to every other event that I've listed above. I'll leave a link in the description of this video if you need to read more about this event. Thank you.